cold water hit her like a slap, shocking, sudden, humiliating. It poured over the brim of her cheap baseball cap, soaked her tightly curled hair, and ran down her face in thick streams. Her plain gray t-shirt clung to her skin, dripping with water. The beige tile floor of the Sterling West Precinct lobby glistened under the fluorescent lights as a puddle formed beneath her sneakers. She stood frozen, not with fear, but something else, something heavier. She didn't scream, didn't flinch, just lifted her head, water trailing from her chin. Her eyes, sharp, cold, controlled, locked onto the red-faced officer, still clutching the empty bottle. "I told you to get out," he barked again, his voice echoing through the silent room. But in that moment, something shifted. The onlookers didn't know her name. Not yet. And Officer Rohr, he had no idea he had just assaulted the new chief of police. The Sterling West Precinct wasn't the kind of place that inspired confidence. The pale yellow paint on the walls was cracked and peeling, like old skin. The tile floor, once beige, was now dulled with years of wear, its surface broken by thin, jagged lines and dark stains no mop could erase. Plastic chairs lined the walls, stiff, blue, uncomfortable, occupied by tired residents who looked like they'd been waiting forever. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, burnt coffee, and something sour lingering beneath. Behind a thick pane of bulletproof glass sat Officer Kevin Rohr. Stocky, red-faced, and square-jawed, he slumped in a worn swivel chair, eyes glued to his phone, thumbs tapping. He didn't glance up when the woman walked in. To him, she was just another problem waiting to happen. She stood at the counter, patient, composed, silent. Her clothes were plain. A gray t-shirt, old jeans, well-worn sneakers. The brim of her baseball cap shadowed her face. She didn't look important, didn't look like someone who mattered. That was his first mistake, because behind that quiet exterior stood someone watching everything. Her posture calm, her eyes sharp. And she was there with a purpose. She cleared her throat gently, just loud enough to be heard. No response. Officer Rohr continued scrolling, ignoring her completely. After another moment, she spoke. Polite, measured. "Excuse me, officer." His eyes finally lifted, narrow, impatient. His gaze swept over her like a scanner. Cap, t-shirt, brown skin, worn shoes. A judgment was already made before she finished her sentence. "What?" he snapped, the words sharp and dismissive. "I'm Maya Jones," she said softly. "I came to ask about the procedure for a temporary restraining order. My neighbor has been making threats." Before she could finish, he let out a long, theatrical sigh and dropped his phone on the counter with a loud thud. "A restraining order?" he mocked. "You want that? Go to the county courthouse. Not here." "I understand," she replied calmly, "but I believe a police report is needed to support the filing." He cut her off, voice rising with contempt. "Let me guess. Loud music, barking dog. Maybe he looked at you funny? Listen, lady, we've got real crimes to deal with. You want us to babysit your apartment drama?" She stood still, unshaken. "Officer, I am a citizen requesting assistance. I believe I have the right to file a report." His eyes narrowed, jaw tightening. She wasn't leaving. And in Officer Rohr's world, women like her weren't supposed to talk back, weren't supposed to stand their ground, especially not with that kind of calm. That was his second mistake. The lobby had gone quiet. The murmurs of the waiting room faded into a tense, uncertain silence. Officer Rohr leaned forward, his face flushing deeper as her words sank in. "You want my name and badge number now?" he growled, his voice sharp with mockery. "What for? So you can go file one of your little complaints?" Her expression didn't change. Calm, steady, still dripping with patience but no longer deferential. "Yes," she answered. "That is my right." Something snapped in him. His chair screeched backward as he stood up. Quick, aggressive. His thick arms swung down onto the desk with a loud bang that made everyone in the room jump. A woman near the corner clutched her purse closer. A young man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Without warning, Rohr stormed through the side door and into the lobby. His steps were loud, angry. He marched straight toward her like a bull charging the matador. Then Hannah, without a word, he raised the half-empty bottle of water in his hand, unscrewed the cap, and turned it over. The cold water fell fast, splashing over her head, soaking her face and clothes. The room gasped. And then, dead silence. She didn't move. Cold water streamed down her forehead, over her cheeks, along her jawline. Her shirt clung tightly to her skin, dripping onto the floor in steady drops. Her sneakers squished as she shifted her weight slightly, but she didn't wipe her face, didn't flinch, didn't speak. Officer Rohr stood just feet away, chest heaving, his lips twisted into a smug grin. He still held the empty bottle like a weapon, as if daring her to speak again. The lobby was silent. Time seemed to stretch. Then, slowly, deliberately, she raised her hands. She brushed the wet strands of hair away from her face. Then, with care, she reached for the brim of her soaked baseball cap and peeled it off, exposing the dark, tightly bound bun, now loose with wet curls. Her full face came into view. Gone was the look of a weary citizen pleading for help. In its place was something different, something sharp, alert, commanding. The kind of face used to issuing orders, not taking them. She met Rohr's eyes and spoke, her voice now clearer, deeper, unwavering. "Officer Kevin Rohr, badge number 482, she said, each word like a hammer. "You've just poured a bottle of water over the head of a civilian who came here seeking help." Rohr blinked, confused. She stepped forward, her soaked sneakers squeaking softly. "Perhaps I should introduce myself properly," she continued. "I am Isabella Moreau, Chief of Police, sworn in last week." The color drained from Rohr's face. The arrogance disappeared in an instant, replaced by panic, disbelief, and something he hadn't felt in years: fear. The room remained silent, the weight of her words crashing harder than the water had. That was his third mistake, and it was the one that would cost him everything. The silence broke with the sound of a chair scraping. The young officer in the corner finally moved, wide-eyed, unsure if he was in a dream or a nightmare. Morrow turned to him with a firm nod. "Get Sergeant Miller. Now tell him the chief is in the lobby." He didn't question. He disappeared down the hallway like his life depended on it. Rohr, still clutching the bottle, took a step back. His lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. Just the shallow rise and fall of his chest. He looked like a man who had stepped off a cliff and realized too late there was no ground beneath him. Sergeant Miller arrived within a minute. Middle-aged, well-pressed uniform, silver hair. He stopped short the moment he saw the soaked woman standing tall and the officer beside her frozen in fear. "Chief?" Miller asked, stunned. Morrow didn't waste a second. "Officer Kevin Rohr, badge 482, is hereby suspended effective immediately. Remove his weapon badge and radio. Isolate him. Internal affairs will arrive shortly." Miller nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Chief." Witnesses in the room began whispering. Some were smiling. Others looked stunned. Within the hour, IA investigators arrived. They reviewed the lobby footage. Every second of it caught on camera. They took statements from civilians, from the young officer, and from Sergeant Miller. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. And as for Rohr, slumped in a private room behind locked doors, he was beginning to understand just how deep a hole he'd dug. 1 week before that unforgettable afternoon, Isabella Morrow had stood before city leaders and cameras, sworn in as the new chief of police for the city of Sterling. She was 41, sharp-eyed, poised, and carried with her a reputation for reform. In her last post, she'd cleaned up a department drowning in lawsuits and public outrage. Sterling had called her in for the same reason. Too many complaints, too much silence. But Morrow knew something the stats didn't show. The rot never started in the big offices. It festered at the front lines where citizens met uniforms face to face. So she did what no one expected. She went undercover. No entourage, no fanfare. Just an old Toyota borrowed from a friend, jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a cap pulled low. She became Maya Jones, a tired, working black woman asking for help. A character built to test the department's culture where it mattered most. The desk, the floor, the attitude. She had read Rohr's file. Too many complaints, too many excuses, a red flag waving in the wind. But she didn't want paper proof. She wanted to see it. So she chose West Precinct, walked in, heart steady, mission clear. And when he poured that water on her head, it didn't shock her. It confirmed what she already feared. That some uniforms still thought power meant cruelty. But this time, the target wasn't powerless. This time, the department had a mirror held up to its face. Everyone expected Officer Kevin Rohr to be fired on the spot. And truth be told, he came close. The disciplinary board had never seen such a clear-cut case. Security footage, eyewitnesses, and the chief herself as the victim. Termination would have been the easy call, but Chief Morrow had something else in mind. She wanted justice, yes, but she also wanted to test something deeper. Could a man like Rohr truly change? So instead of ending his career, she handed him a sentence that might be harder than any firing. A 1-year suspension without pay and enrollment in a brutal 2-year reform program. It wasn't just training. It was therapy, anger management, racial bias education, de-escalation drills, community service, 200 hours of it in neighborhoods he once mocked. Every 3 months, he'd face a panel, not just from the department, but from the community, to prove he was changing. If he failed, he'd be gone. No appeal, no return. Rohr didn't thank her. Not really. He was too stunned, too humiliated. But deep down he knew this was his last chance. He could rebuild, or drown in the mess he created. And now, the clock was ticking. What happened in that quiet, crumbling lobby was more than a scandal. It was a moment, raw, uncomfortable, and long overdue. It showed us how easily power can slip into cruelty when unchecked, how uniforms can become armor not for protection, but for pride, and how sometimes justice doesn't knock. It walks in quietly, soaking wet. Chief Morrow's decision wasn't just bold, it was necessary. She exposed a culture that hid behind silence and routine, but she also did something rare. She offered a path forward, not just punishment, but transformation. Whether Rohr walks that path honestly or stumbles off, it remains to be seen. Still, the message was clear. Change starts with courage, not slogans, not press releases, action, because the system doesn't fix itself. Someone has to walk into the fire, unrecognized, and demand better. And this time, that someone was the chief. What do you think? Was Chief Morrow right to go undercover? Or did she cross a line? And did Officer Rohr deserve a second chance? Or should he have been fired outright? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice matters here.